I am pleased to be here with Charles Casillo, writer, actor, and of course, a friend of Redline. Charles, thanks for being here.
Oh, it's such a good pleasure to be here with you again.
Let's talk a little bit about your work as a writer. How many books have you written and published?
I've had 7 books published, various different genres and subjects, but lately it's been more of vintage Hollywood, golden age of Hollywood movie star books like Marilyn Monroe, Elizabeth Taylor, Montgomery Clift.
That's been like a topic of interest for you, right? That's kind of like a love of yours. How did that come to be? How did you come to kind of really become fascinated with old Hollywood?
Well, back in my childhood, before we had like streaming services and cable networks, there was only like a few stations, and they had the Late Late Show on at night. And I was an insomniac even back then, and I started watching the old movies. And I also, though, I was kind of different in many ways from like the neighborhood kids. Like I wasn't really good at sports, and I was more of a loner. I liked to read and be by myself. And really, those old time movie stars started to feel like my friends. I just related to them, and it kind of took me away from. I guess this is true of everybody that's into movies. It takes you away from whatever's going on in your real life and brings you to a different world. And
It's
that's
true. It's
like
always been a case of like
escapism.
Art and film and television and books have always had their place because there is that beautiful escapism that they provide to people.
Yeah, and it stayed with me through the years. The more I found out, the more I wanted to know. One personality led to another personality. You know, there's Cary Grant, Clark Gable, and Rita Hayworth, and I just loved them all. And as far as the films go, I keep going back to them. You know, they're films that I could always go back to. It's like visiting with family members. And there's just something about the films of that era that I really, really like. I like the dialogue. I like the plots, the decor, the music. So still a great escape for me.
There's something about classic films and even films now that we look going back to like the 70s, the 80s, and 90s. They're just made differently. There's characters that are larger than life, but there's like a relatableness to it. I don't know if I sound like an old person complaining, but I just feel like movies that are being made these days, I don't think there's that same connection to the audience member. Like there used to be something personal, like whether you knew them or not, you kind of felt like you had a relationship with them, even with like television shows. You look at shows like The Wonder Years, and it's relatable. And I think maybe part of that is, when you look at how those films are constructed, they're still constructed around certain elements that are in most people's lives: family, parents, siblings, struggle. Nowadays, everyone is connecting not so much to storytelling, but like these almost like influencers. And it's just such a different dynamic of an audience relationship with the entertainer. I mean, so many influencers now are kind of replacing, I think, actors that like people relate to. What are your thoughts about that?
I think that many filmmakers start out with a message they want to get across rather than a story they want to tell. And I think that sometimes it comes out as you're almost being preached to rather than watching a film. No matter what the message is, I don't think that that's a good place to start. Or if that is a place to start, you have to know how to put it in there in subtle ways so that the story really envelops you and you don't even know that you're being given a lesson or, being shown a different way of life or things like that. So that's my biggest gripe. But as far as the influencers, I have to say, I feel in a way I'm envious of them. They're very lucky because in my day, when I was starting as an actor back in the 80s, the only way that you could really hope to get work was, there was a publication called Backstage that came out once a week, and we all had our headshots, and we would staple our resume out, and we would spend one day mailing it out to all the casting agents and whoever was casting for a film or something, and then you would just wait. And you had all this energy. You wanted to be working. And you didn't know what to do. I mean, maybe occasionally you would do a workshop in the West 50s or the West 40s or something, and you'd have 25 people in the audience. But today they can do their own thing. They can do their own work. They can make their own skits. And instead of doing it in an audience of 20, they could put it out there and accumulate audiences of hundreds of thousands, and they could be seen that way. And, people can choose who they think that should be a star. But unfortunately, I don't think it's balanced out yet. I think we're not picking out the cream of the crop yet. Some influencers are becoming influencers for the wrong reasons. But I think that eventually it will balance out. And the people will be like the old time studios, where the old time studios chose who was going to be a star and groomed them. I think the public will be doing that.
To your point too, they used to always say, "Write what you know." And I feel like people aren't writing what they know anymore. They're like writing what they want to tell you or
Mhm.
what agenda they want you to get behind of their emotional beliefs. And like so much of that is like seeping into films and television shows where it's not really writing what you know. It's like writing what I want to tell you. And,
Mhm.
and it comes off very forced and comes off like to your point, almost like there's not a lot of substance behind it. And it's almost like just coming from not a good place.
And I think that they're misreading their audience because audiences pick up on that, and it's almost like they're telling you, "I'm smarter than you, so let me tell you something that you need to know because I'm smarter than you."
Yeah. It comes
And
from like a holier than thou.
pious, yeah,
Yeah.
a lot of times. I mean, but when you look at the old movies, they often had messages, but you just didn't realize it because the story was so good, the dialogue
Yes.
was so snappy.
There was subtext. To get the message, you had to dig a little bit, like a good book or like a good novel. Like, it's not so in your face and so
Right.
obvious.
So that's the era we're in right now. Like 20 years from now, this is going to be the era. It's going to be known for the pious era, the soapbox era, where everyone was trying to tell you how to live or what to like or what to believe in the books and in the movies.
I think you're right. Let's talk about your first book. When was your first book published and what was the topic? It was a biography, I think, right?
Yes, my first published book was a biography of a writer named John Recchi. He's still alive. He's in his 90s. He's the first writer who wrote about homosexuality in a very open way. He had been a male hustler on Times Square and then in LA. And he met all these different kinds of people, drag queens and other hustlers and the Johns that paid for him. And he wrote them in a book about them in a book called City of Night. And I read it when I was a teenager. And it was the first time that I read a book where it took all these very seedy situations and locations and questionable characters. And it was written about in a very lyrical, almost poetic way. And it kind of taught me that you can write about things and turn them the way that you can transform with art. You know, you can transform any situation into a work of art. So years later, when I was writing and I had first moved to LA, I was working for a magazine and they said, "Who would you like to interview?" You know, it was an ideas meeting. And I said, "Well, I always was very interested in John Recchi." So they said, "Well, if you can get him, you know, yeah, that's a good idea." So I wrote him a letter and he answered. And when he called and left a message for me, it was almost like for me getting a message from James Dean because he had been my idol for so many years to hear his voice on my answering machine. So I wound up profiling him for the magazine, and then a publisher came to me and said, "Would you expand on this to make it into a book?" And so I talked to him about it because you couldn't do a book about him without his cooperation because so much of his life was lived in the shadows. He had made a whole career of writing about that life.
Yeah, there was no chat GPT back,
Right.
back then that you could just scroll and use, to mine data from, right?
Right,
You actually had
exactly.
to do some like
Yes.
legitimate journalism.
A lot of legwork involved in more ways than one. No, just kidding.
Talk a little bit about, so prior to penning some books, you were working for magazines or periodicals. Like, what were you doing before that as a writer?
Well, what happened is I never wanted to be a writer, first of all. But sometimes life calls the direction. I was trying to be an actor, and I really wasn't getting anywhere with those auditions, you know, sending out my headshot. And I was thinking, like, what could I do with my energy? How could I, you know, have more opportunities to act? And then I said, well, maybe if I was writing about the people on Broadway or the people that were making films, the directors and the actors. And so I approached different little, show business magazines in New York that were mostly like given out in the clubs and the bars. And somebody gave me a shot at doing it. And before I knew it, I was getting cover stories. And one thing I learned is everyone would talk to me because everyone was publicizing something. There was always like John Waters was publicizing a new movie, or Joan Rivers was doing a play on Broadway. So I got to talk to all these people. And then one night, when I was about a year into it, I got a call and it was, she said, "Hi, I'm Ann from the New York Times." And my first thought was, oh my God, somebody in my family did something terrible and they want a quote.
They want dirty details.
Yes. I was gonna say no comment, click. But she said, I've been seeing your stuff and we're looking for a writer who could profile up and coming talent on the edge, you know, new people. And for some reason, I keep going back to you. So she gave me a shot, and my first piece got a full page in the Sunday Times. It was on a playwright named Nikki Silver. And after that, I would go to the theater, and everyone would say, "The Times is here. The Times is here." And I would be looking around like, where? But it was me.
It's you.
And then I was a professional.
That's amazing.
And it took over, you know. And you gotta
Isn't
make
it amazing how that works when you kind of are working through your career and you kind of get one of those type of jobs? Like I've had those jobs, and you're like, I remember one TV show that I directed. It was a pretty big production. I just remember the first day on set, there's all this like people milling around, and then there's like someone bringing a chair, and I'm like, "What are you doing with that?" They're like, "This is your chair." I'm like, "Oh, I'm supposed to pretend like this is normal now." But it is a nice feeling, right, to be treated well and to kind of have those like milestones of success as you do this, throughout your career. How long were you with the Times?
I was with them. I was never a staff writer, but I was a
Okay.
freelancer with them for about 3 years. And then I was like, "Oh, I'm getting older. If I'm going to act, I really have to, get serious." So I moved to LA. I gave up everything in New York, and I just, 3 pieces of luggage and moved to LA. Got an agent, but you got to make a living. So then I wrote for the LA Times.
Yeah. Yeah, it's always good to have that fallback. I always approached pursuing this the same way. Like when I first moved to New York, I did anything and everything related to film and TV, like including casting calls. I never really wanted to be an actor, but I'm like, listen, if it brings me close to production people, like that's better than working in a coffee shop where again, you could still meet people and network there, but I just wanted anything in the industry. And that was also my same approach of like, if there was any production job I can get, I would say yes to it. It might not have been the one I wanted. Even transcribing. When I first moved to New York, I worked a lot as a transcriber where you're essentially just watching field interviews from reporters and just, I might have been writing, transcribing one of your field interviews. But even that, it just brings you closer to a goal. And I think that's a smart approach for like young people always ask, like, how do I work in the industry? And the answer is like, say yes to everything.
Mhm.
Say yes to everything, especially when you're young, especially when you've got more energy
Yes.
and more future
Mhm.
and, maybe no kids, no family. Like you could give that time. Like you should say yes to everything because you never know where one thing's going to lead to another. Think about how we met. Now, when we work together, it's usually you're a writer, I'm a director, you're acting in something I'm directing. But we met through me editing one of your projects, right?
Right,
Do
right.
you remember how we met?
Yes,
We met on
yes.
Craigslist.
That's right. That's right.
I think, right?
Yeah, I was looking. I had a movie that was roughly edited, and I needed a final, good, polished edit. And I saw you, and
I think I probably responded to a post that you put up looking for an editor. I think.
yeah, that was it exactly. And I saw, I was reading them. I saw yours and gave it a shot. I came here. You had I was going to say you had very good energy. You're a very good energy person. That's the first thing you feel. But then the thing was that, like, while we were working, you not only did everything I asked, which is rare, but you did it better or had your own ideas that were better for it. So I knew that I wanted to work with you more because that was so rare. Because up to that point, I was always looking for community.
Yes.
I've always heard of community like say like John Waters. Like John Waters had like his people. He would make these little low budget films, but he had these great people that he'd work with. And I always wanted that. I remember even putting ads in the Village Voice when I was young, like looking for a community of artists.
I mean, we're here in my prospective community. That's what I've tried to basically build here in New York is like a hub for artists because that has always been my goal as well. It's funny. You have these like idealistic views of film and TV and art and how it works. And then sometimes you have experiences that make you go, oh, is this really how this is? And it's not, it doesn't fit into that. But when you can find the right people to have that click, it is great because it's a collaborative art form. And what you're talking about, like, working as a writer, actor, that movie, if I'm not mistaken, you were the writer, you had acted in it. I think there was another director. Maybe you fired him. I don't remember.
There was 2 directors. No, I didn't direct it. There was 2 directors, but basically I directed.
You did a lot of the work.
Yeah.
Yes. Well, that's how I became an editor myself. I never really wanted to be an editor, but as I was directing projects and I would try to articulate what I wanted, I found a lot of editors to be just so like lazy and just so like run of the mill and so boring where you don't want someone just to push buttons and do something for you. You want to, like you said, maybe help execute your vision, but then go, all right, I see where you're trying to go as a director. Let me show you this. Let me show you that. And then that way there is a collaborative process that goes on there. But I could never find that much with editors. And so at some point I just said, fuck it, like I'll do it myself. And so that's pretty much how I became an editor.
And that's how I found you.
I went to film school for writing and directing, never editing, and I self-taught I was a self-taught editor, born out of frustration. But a great, I think, takeaway from that is to like what we're saying, embrace everything and do everything, because that editing job led to some great directing jobs that we did together, and it grew a relationship that we worked into the capacity that I think we wanted.
Yeah.
But if I would have never responded, and it wasn't this giant budget movie. It was a small, but it was a good movie, and I enjoyed it. Like it was a fun process. There's something to be said also, like I've done jobs strictly for money that I hated the creative, and you sit there going like, I went to fucking art school, and I'm like cutting this garbage reality show for money, and it if you're a true artist, it kills your soul. And then you work on other projects where like it might not be about the money, but you're going, oh, I'm enjoying what I'm doing. Like there's a craft to this. I'm working with someone who also appreciates the craft. So right off the bat, I remember we were downstairs. Every time someone walks into our studio, they're like, it's a transformer. It's never the same thing as it was last time. But I don't know if you remember, it was so long ago. The edit rooms were downstairs here, and I remember we were working in those back edit rooms, cutting that movie, and it was such a good experience and so much fun. I want to go back to the books for a minute. The first book that you had, the biography on John Ricci. What was like the research process like? What was it like to like put together your first book? How long did it take, and what was that process like?
It took 2 years. One of the reasons was because by that point, he had a huge body of work, so I had to read everything and familiarize myself with it. But what made it a little bit easier was that he cooperated. It was an authorized biography, so he gave me a list of people that I could talk to, a list of friends and family, and I would meet with him, once a week and have a really long interview and talk to him about it. And we became very good friends. He became one of my best friends and mentor, and just like he just really enriched my life. It was, it was another charmed experience.
What was it like to work with him? How is he as a person? Was he easy to work with, or was he ever difficult?
He was very easy because we were very much alike. We had a lot of similarities in our lives. Like he was an old movie person like me, and like for very much the same reasons. When he was growing up in El Paso, Texas, he would go to the movie theaters and watch the old movie as an escape from, a lot of his life of loneliness and stuff. Even though he had a big family, he felt alone in it.
It is amazing. And it's funny, like I have 2 young kids, and I see a lot of younger kids these days, and they're not into film, and they're not, I mean, like, it's funny. The experience I have with my own kids, I have to kind of force them to watch a movie, but then usually afterwards they're like, that was really good. But the process of getting there is so difficult. And I almost feel bad for the generations of today. I know I sound like an old person complaining about these, the way things are these days, but there was always something nice about that. Like even for myself still to this day, when I am, stressed or frustrated, like one of the best things that I enjoy is, have a glass of whiskey and watch a great film.
Yeah.
There's a great escapism to it. And with the world is so busy and noisy these days that, to have any form of escapism is great. And I just, I wish younger generations would embrace it. I think it will come back, because it would also, to the flip side of it, sounds like I'm being pessimistic, but to the flip side of it, you start to see like my 10-year-old for Christmas asked for a record player. And I'm like, oh, that's a good sign. And then you start to see like old things become new again. So I do think, even like with the clients that I have here, the last couple projects that I've had come in have been younger filmmakers taking some risks, doing all on-set tricks and no post, no VFX. In a world of AI now, they're like, no VFX, or at least no post VFX, all in-camera stuff. And so hopefully some of those old things will come new and come back around again. I think they always do. It's just always tough in those transitionary times. Like we're in a very transitionary time in our industry. And it's kind of like you just got to hold out and survive and wait to see what becomes the new thing. Going back to the first book, what was the hardest part of writing that first book, would you say, looking back?
Well, okay, so the hardest part is it goes hand in hand with the easiest part. You're working with someone who's cooperating with you and who's like a legendary figure. But then if you want to put some negative things in there that you've discovered on your own, or maybe a book that you weren't that fond of, you know that he's going to read it. So for me, that was a difficult thing, because now this person is my friend and I admire him, above most people in the world. And I might have to say something negative, or I might have to put a New York Times review that was negative. So doing that balance of being honest in the book and letting the reader get a full picture of who he is, as they say, warts and all,
Yeah.
but not offending him.
It is difficult. It's one of the most difficult things when you do a documentary, when you write a book on someone, is you want to present authenticity and integrity, but, no one's perfect. And so it is a difficult thing to navigate. How would you suggest to someone who's out there younger, maybe writing their first book, dealing with someone in the same way, like, how do you approach that honesty? Do you just talk to the subject and say, "Listen, this is what I'm gonna do"? Do they get a chance to kind of look at that book before it's published and give you feedback and criticism if they wanna take something out?
Well, it would depend. You have that deal before you start working. Most celebrities are going to ask to see it before you hand it into your publisher. But some, big time writers will make a deal like, no, you just have to work with me and trust me.
Yeah, or they won't do the project.
I would say it would totally depend on the temperament of, who you're working with. I mean, if you're working with Faye Dunaway, you might want to tread lightly, with your questions about the hard parts of her life because, she's known to be a little difficult. But if it's somebody who, kind of like John, you could bring something up and he would talk about it. He would talk about it and give his side of the story, but you still have to put the other side of the story because there's always another side of the story. I do remember once, though, he did say I had put a negative review in it that was very hurtful and very negative, and it was obviously a jealous review. Some reviews are just based on jealousy.
Oh, yeah, sometimes people review things, sometimes they don't even see the movie, the picture, the book, anything.
Yeah.
I've known people who are critics who don't even look at the material.
This writer wrote the same type of subject matter, and then John came along and just usurped him and wrote the ultimate book on the subject. So he wrote him a really negative review, and it was very clever and very funny. And I put a lot of it in there, and John said, I had to read that damn review once, so I have to read it again in my own book.
I want to go back to something you talked about. You said it took almost 2 years to write that 1st book. So that book came about, there was an article and a profile that you had written elsewhere, and then someone had said, hey, let's make this a book.
Yes.
So I one thing I always want to try to talk about here is these little things that I feel like they don't teach you in film school, they don't teach you in art school, and it's like inside stuff. So that job, right? You're kind of a freelance writer and you get this other project. It takes you 2 years. How does that work in terms of like your deal, your contract? Like in terms of money, are you paid by the book flat rate? Is it by the hour? Is it, X and then royalties? And then what is your deadline like? Did the publisher know it was going to take you 2 years to put that book
Yeah,
together?
it's in the contract. You can ask for how long you want. I asked for 2 years because I had to write while I was, I had to make a living while I was doing it. It wasn't a big publisher, so I wasn't getting a big advance. So the way that it works is on signing of the contract, you get half of the advance. So let's just, for the sake of saying, say it's $100,000, which it isn't. I mean, that now maybe, but not then. So you'd get $50,000 on the signing of the contract before you even started writing it. Then when you hand it in 2 years later, you get the rest of it. Then you have to pay that off in sales. Now, if you don't pay it back, you don't. If the sales of the book doesn't make $100,000, you don't have to pay it back. You keep it. But when it does pay it back, then you start making the residuals.
Right, now you can start to add on top of
Yeah.
that profit. Good. I feel like no one ever talks about this.
Right.
And everyone always like, how do I become a writer? How do I treat it like a profession as opposed to a hobby? I mean, so that's great advice.
But sometimes it's 3 times. Sometimes you get paid on the signing of the contract, when you hand it in, and when the book comes out. So that's even spreading it out longer.
Let's look at your most recent book, not the one you're working on. I know you're working on a book, but the last published book was Elizabeth and Monty, I think, right?
Yes.
Let's talk a little bit about that book. What is that book and how did it come about?
Okay, well, it came from my obsession with old movies, and I'm a big Montgomery Clift fan and Elizabeth Taylor fan separately. But what started happening with doing movie star biographies, especially iconic movie stars, is they've been written about over so many years by so many great writers. They've been investigated. They've written their own books or given really long interviews. So I think that the challenge for the writer today is to come up with new approaches in looking at them through their life. And one of the things about Elizabeth Taylor's life and Montgomery Clift's life is the friendship that they shared together. It was a remarkable friendship, and it changed the direction of both of their lives. She was a 17-year-old starlet, a beautiful up-and-coming star, and he was a Broadway actor that Hollywood had, brought in to be a movie star, but he was, really considered like an actor's actor. And they were going to make A Place in the Sun, which was based on, an American tragedy. So it was this really artsy movie, and Elizabeth was 17. She had been in the studio system since she was a child. Her mother was running her life, and the other part of her life, the studio was running. She was desperate to get married, to fall in love and get married, just so she could become her own person. In those days, that was the only way for a woman to really do it. And Montgomery Clift was 28, and he was gay. He was beautiful to look at, and he was charming and funny, and he encouraged her to act. He was the first one. Before him, it was always, look beautiful, hit your mark, say your line. Okay, thanks, Elizabeth. We're done. He taught her to look, her character's name was Angela, to look at Angela. Why does she behave this way? Why does she choose this over that? Why does she fall in love with him? How does she feel about that? So she started to become more and more enamored with him. And she fell in love with him, and she wanted him to be the one that would sort of rescue her and help her escape from the studio system, from her mother, and help her go into the next step of becoming a woman. And he was torn because he was in love with her in his way, but yet he was a gay man. So how does that play out? And he had he was trying to tell her in his own way, but without telling her. And he was bringing men to the set, very obvious men. And she was confused because he would get very close with her, and they would even kiss.
Wow, yeah.
And then the next day he'd be on the set with some strange man. So she was very confused. And then finally he came out to her, and the relationship went on for up until his death. And it changed in so many ways because eventually she became the biggest star. And he had one night they were starring in a movie together called Raintree County, and she was having a dinner party. And by this point he was becoming an alcoholic. And on the way home from a dinner party that she was giving in the Hollywood Hills, he had a car crash. He crashed into a telephone pole, and he destroyed his face. Everyone from the party came running down the hill to rescue him, and they were all like, "Don't go near it. The car could blow up." And she was like, "I'm going to Monty," and she climbed in through the window, and she found him like crouched under the dashboard, and she picked up his head and laid it in her lap, and he was motioning with his fingers to his mouth, and she stuck her fingers in his mouth, and she pulled his teeth out of his throat.
Jeez.
And he went deeper into alcohol and drug addiction, and it really became like her kind of, she became almost like a surrogate caregiver. Like she cast him in another movie after that because his box office started to go down, and people were afraid to hire him because of insurance problems, because he was always
It's
drunk.
the brutal side of the industry too. It's like, if you're
Yeah.
an attractive person and you're no longer attractive, and
Yeah.
now your value drops and your work goes away.
Right.
How did you get interested in the Elizabeth and Monty project? Like, how did that become like inspiration for you to write that book?
Well, I wanted to write about one or the other. But there is a really great Montgomery Clift biography by a woman named Patricia Bosworth, and she really covered his life well. And there's some really great biographies of Elizabeth Taylor. And it comes to the question of, what can I add to that story? A cradle to grave biography. And I was, thinking, and they were both gone, so I couldn't get it, exclusive material from them, and no diaries were forthcoming, So I started thinking of their relationship and thinking like that should be examined. Put that relationship under a microscope, show how that called the direction for them, how that changed each other's lives, how that made her grow as a person. I think that later on in life, perhaps her AIDS work in charity had a lot to do with him. She was like a very, very, very dear friend of hers that she loved very dearly, and she always had after him a close gay friend, and I think that it was partly tribute to him.
Yeah, and it's a great example of how two different people can affect one another's lives in so many ways.
Yes.
Again, trying to find some like maybe advice for someone who's trying to write, or trying to find a subject matter, whether it's a story, a script, a book. You brought up the idea that like obviously these are people in the public eye,
Mm-hmm.
so there's so many projects out there where you're like, oh, it's the Rolling Stones. There's like 70 biographies on the Rolling Stones, or all these different. It's about trying to find how your project can be something different,
How you can
right?
make it your own.
Yeah, how you can kind of tell maybe a similar how you can tell a familiar story with a different spin on it, right? And
Right.
finding that thing that is what makes it stand out. Is that what you would say that you're
Absolutely.
looking for as a writer?
If you're writing about somebody like Elvis or, any iconic person that has been written about and looked at from every angle this way and that way, the first thing that you have to bring is your perspective, your voice. So that's the first thing. But you also want to look at the stories or the story that hasn't been magnified yet. And people that have that kind of exciting creative life, there's always things within it that you could find that jumps out at you. And that's what I want to concentrate on.
And when you write, are you trying to kind of being standoffish when it comes to like your own opinion as the author? Are you trying to be an unbiased kind of third party and represent just facts and information? Or are you trying to also find the like relativeness and relatability to you as the author as well? How's that line work for you?
I think the trick is to do both. I mean, first, you're almost writing mechanically, especially in a biography. There's dates. There's marriage dates, there's, movie dates, there's birth dates, there's children's birth dates, there's all that. And you got to put down the facts. So that's what you got to do first. Then when you're reading, like if the person left, for example, a lot of interviews and like somebody like Elizabeth Taylor, you could watch her interviews on Larry King and you could read interviews that she gave back in the 50s and you start to know them and you start to form your own opinions because no one could really know a person, like even someone you're married to. You never really completely know a person. So you put down the facts, you put down the things that we know, but then of course your opinion comes into it, your take on it. It's like as if you're even writing a story of your best friend. Another friend could write about that particular friend and there would be two different books.
That is such a great point, and I think it's so relevant to today, right? Because there's so many things that go on that are negative, right? You look at some of the recent stuff that's happened, right? There's been assassinations of public people, and people go, "Well, he was a jerk,"
Mhm.
he was not. It's like, did you know this person? The public persona of someone, even in film and TV and interviews, is still not a true reflection of who that human being
No.
is. And like you said, even when you know someone, when you're friends with someone, when you're close with someone, you don't really truly know that person, right? If you really understand the human condition, there's so many facets to what makes a person. And I think maybe it kind of gets lost on certain people. And again, like I'm not trying to sound snobbish, but like when you are an artist, you try to dissect things. And when you are a writer, and especially when you write fiction, you start to write layers because you're looking for truth. And when you write those layers, you start to understand how complex people are.
Mhm.
And so when someone goes like, "Oh, this person, this celebrity was murdered.
Mm.
Well, I didn't agree with their views, so they were a bad person." You don't know that person. You don't know them.
Yeah.
And even if you see them in front of the lens, that is often a very different reflection of who
Mhm.
they are. We have a soundstage downstairs. A perfect example. I won't name names, but we shoot everything from TV shows to music videos, and there's a really really famous rapper who's shot here before, and off camera he comes in, and but when before the camera's rolling, it's "Hi, how are you? It's nice to see you again. It's really great to be here. Good to see you. Good to see you. Oh, is the camera rolling? Rolling. Yo, what's up, everybody?" And it's a completely different persona because
Mhm.
that is what's selling, and that is what is selling records. And so people think they know that person by what they see at the end of the frame, but behind the scenes, that person is different. I'm not saying they're phony or fake. It's just this is acting.
Right.
It's all of this is fake to a degree. I just really thought that was an interesting point to what you're saying. I literally was just having that exact conversation in the same sentiment with someone recently,
Oh,
just
really?
about how well do you really know someone?
Mhm.
Like how well do you know somebody?
Sometimes you hear about somebody having a fight with a friend and they say, This was my friend for 30 years. I can't believe they did that to me." Well, there's a side that you didn't know in those 30 years.
All right, let's look about first book and last book. So how long did it take you to write that most current book?
The Elizabeth and Monty was a year and a half. I know writers that do it in a year, but I have to put a cushion. If I know that I have a year to do it, I'll start to panic at the 6-month mark.
Start to panic.
So if I have that cushion of the 6 months to know that like I could, all right, now I could take when I get to the year, I'm like pretty well into it.
Yeah.
And I could take my time for the final 6 months.
So that process, that like a year and a half, Is it getting to a first completed final draft there, or is it rewrites? Like, how many rewrites are you doing? Or are you someone who kinda gets it pretty close in that first time through?
No, I like to rewrite the chapters that go along rather than the whole book. Like I'll rewrite chapters as I'm working on it. The first part of my work is trying to be a detective mostly because you're trying to track down people that are still alive that maybe knew this person, somebody that worked for them, or someone who's a child of someone who worked for them who stories might have got passed down in the family.
And are you writing in sequential order when you come to your chapters, or are you writing content and then maybe you ever switch around
I
your order?
switch
You
around.
do?
That's just the
You're
way
like
I
the
work.
Quentin Tarantino of biography.
No, I put it in order when I usually put it in order when the book comes out, but
Yeah.
when I'm writing it, like, for example, if you're gonna write about, the chapter of Monty's accident, it's very emotional and it's very, heart-wrenching and tragic, and you might wanna write when you're in that kind of a frame, when you're in a melancholy mood or something like that. So, I might have all the mechanical stuff down, like the dates and, the locations of where it happened, but when I'm feeling it, the emotions, I'll go back and do it no matter where I am in the book, and usually I do that in longhand.
I love that. I love that. I love that concept and that idea because, again, as someone who's written different things myself, TV shows, movies, I can relate to that because there's when you're kind of, especially when you're dealing with a real person. I once wrote a script based on the life of a real person, and it's almost like you start to channel them, and like
Mhm.
weird things start
Yes.
to happen
Yeah.
where you go, "This is like." I mean, I'm getting goosebumps as
Yeah,
I
it
talk
does
about it.
happen.
I wrote a story once about a person. It was the last public hanging in the United States of this individual, and I was writing kind of like a really loose interpretation of it. But as I started to write it and I started to make fictional characters, I would start to then go back and research more, and I would go like, "Oh God, I wrote this fictional character who's like this guy's friend." And I find some article like he had a friend of that same name.
Mhm.
So like strange things start to happen.
Yes.
It starts to take a life of its own. Do you find that happens when you're writing?
Absolutely, absolutely. It's almost like they're whispering to you. They're telling you things that you wanna know, that no one knows. I mean, you can't put it in unless you could prove it because then it's just, supernatural. But no, I remember when I was, working on a book about Marilyn Monroe, I went to see a psychologist, to talk about not for my well, I do go to a psychologist, but I mean, this was just to talk about Marilyn and
Who
her
doesn't?
problems. Yeah.
What artist doesn't?
This was to talk about Marilyn and her problems, and I was telling him about her childhood and things, and when we were wrapping it up, he said, "Do you dream about her?" So I said, all the time." And he said, "Because this is very dark material." And I wanted to go on with the session, but it was over to tell him about how I don't only dream about her, sometimes I wake up feeling her, feeling her nearby, feeling her, it is almost in a way supernatural.
It's almost like channel you channel these things. It
Mhm.
just like as I have it as an editor, when I'm cutting something, it goes beyond like happy accidents where like things will happen. Like even like when you edit, you don't edit to the second, you edit to the frame. There's 23 frames in a second. And so you're talking about like minutia. And
Mhm.
there are times where you'll just throw something and it's like it'll line up and the odds of it lining up are so weird and few, and especially when you go, "Oh, look how that happened." In terms of like layers or things that become now like two images bleed into one, and you go like, you're working, you mean to do it, but these like little happy accents start to, occur, and you just start to go, it's a feeling. You can go, this is taking a life of its own, and I think writing is the same thing. It has that same kind of experience,
Well,
especially when you're onto
if you
something.
wanna make it metaphysical, I mean, you could say, well, we're all energy, right? And we're all connected, or energy that's connected. So maybe if you're writing about somebody and all your focus is on one person, whether dead or alive, their energy finds you somehow, and, you feel a current of them, you know?
Absolutely. We talked about the timeline of the last book and the first book, similar timeline. So, like, what I appreciate about hearing that is good art, no matter what the medium, it does take time. Like, nothing is really, the idea of rushing something. And I think we're in a world now where everyone wants to rush everything. Write a book in a month. No one writes a good book in a month. It takes time to let it gestate, to let it. You have to think about it, right? How many times I'm sure you have this where you're working on something, it's not even that you have writer's block, but you just like go for a walk in nature and like just that moment, or you walk around the city or you do something and you go, now I got it. Like, you need
Oh,
time. You need breaks, but there are no breaks because, like, when you have a break, you're still thinking
you're
about the
working.
work. You are. It's working here, and you're thinking about how things are gonna maybe play out or how to word something, and, like, you just need time as an artist, and I think a lot of people also make that mistake these days where they try to rush the whole experience.
Mhm.
Again, going back to, like, the video editing, editing films, whenever I'm working with a client and they give me time, the product is always better and the process is always better. And I feel like writing is similar to where, like, it takes time. You have to let that, it's part of the process.
Mhm.
And I just wish more people would kind of realize that, not have these deadlines. Every time I've been given a deadline, with the exception of one Super Bowl show I worked on, because Super Bowl was coming and you kind of like we almost missed the deadline. That was very stressful. Outside of that, every other deadline I've ever been given has been like fake, where it's like, you got to get it in by Tuesday. And then here we are 4 months later. You're like, yeah, what happened to Tuesday 4 months ago? Clearly it wasn't that important. Time frame in terms of creating the book is similar, but like, how would you say, if you were looking back at those two experiences when you were just starting out and now you're kind of a seasoned writer, has your process changed at all?
No, not really. Going back to my beginnings, I was never a trained writer. I never took a writing class in my life. So I've had writer friends tell me, like, you've got to treat it like a job. You've got to get up in the morning at the same time, get dressed as if you were going to work, take lunch every day at the same time. I did try that once, and I found myself doing it for 2 days in a row, and then on the third day, stumbling to the computer at 11 o'clock in my underwear. It's just not me. I do a lot of my writing in the middle of the night. And like, we said, I jump around, where I feel like writing, where where I'm feeling the moment, or so, and it really hasn't changed. I mean, I probably fine-tuned things and have learned how to do things quicker. But no, the process is pretty much the same for me.
Do you outline a lot or you kind of find the story as you kind of get into it?
Well, for me, in my experience, before I sell a book, I have to write, give them like an outline. I have to give the publisher an outline and outline a proposal. You have to write the title and then the chapters with a little synopsis of each chapter, and then a comparison of other books that are like it and how they did. It's pretty involved, but I find that when I'm writing the book, it's impossible to follow with that because you start finding things out. You,
Yeah, I would hope to imagine it actually becomes better
Oh, yeah. Oh, it
than the
becomes much
preconceived
better.
plan.
Becomes much better and very different. But that shows them that you could do it, I guess. But no, I could never follow that.
Well, it's all about safety and security. Like with all of these people, publishers, network executives, I think my experience has always been like people are just trying to save their ass. If they're just like, yeah, go write a book about Elvis. And if it comes out poorly, they're going to go, you just gave this guy money to write a book about Elvis. Like, but if you have that proposal and that plan, it gives a little bit of security and go, all right, well, this is what he was going to do. So
Mhm.
it's kind of about justifying, I think, maybe that risk someone's giving you.
Yeah.
How do you know when a book is done?
Well, for me, a book is never done. That's why I don't read my work after it's published because I'll start rewriting it. When the story is told and I read it and I'm satisfied, then I know it's done. But if I wait a week and go back and look at it again, I'll find things that I want to change. So it just comes to a point where it's like a few weeks before the deadline, and I got it all there. I never miss a deadline. That comes from my newspaper days when I learned how to hit a deadline. So, it's all there. There's parts of it that I really like. There's other parts that I can deal with. I say that it's done, and then I hand it in.
What would you say? What makes a good writer?
I think that a writer who has a voice. When I'm reading, I always like a writer who has a voice that is their own, that it's unique and it's really coming from a place of them. Like sometimes I start reading, say, a novel or a short story, and I could see the writing classes
Yeah.
in the writing. It's almost like I'm reading like all the workshops that the person went through. It's not like it's not coming from a real place. That's just my gut feeling about it.
I know exactly what you mean. I always kind of look at it as reading something that's written from the mind or from the soul. And
Mhm.
I want to read something from the soul.
Me
And
too.
I will say, as a writer myself, I've gotten more places from writing from the heart and not from the mind. I'm not a perfect writer. I'm gonna have some run-on sentences for sure. And it might not be the most punctual, grammatically perfect writer. but I've always tried to write truth and with honesty, and that has opened up so many doors for me, and including, you had mentioned, kinda getting validation from, was it maybe John, just kinda calling you
Yes, when he
so I had a similar experience where I was trying to get a fairly famous and well, he was a very successful songwriter to become a part of a project I was working on, almost as a consultant. And I know what other people had tried to get him, and like I'd already been told by so many people, like, "You're never going to get him." He's like, "Never." He doesn't want to. He's retired. But I wrote him an email, just an email, and he responded, and I ended up getting him on the project, and the first thing he said was, "I could tell immediately how you write, that you write from the heart." And, like,
Wow.
it makes you stick out. It also was, like, such an awesome it was like winning an Oscar.
Yeah.
Just getting that validation and going, "God, man, this guy's written so many great songs, and he's, paying me a compliment that I'm a good writer." It's such a good feeling, right, when you kinda pass that on
Yeah.
to somebody else, one writer to another.
But it's true. It just underlines my point. You do know when it's coming from a real place. That's why I think my career as a writer took off. I was genuinely interested in the people. That's advice I would give somebody. Not that I'm anyone to take advice from, but if somebody asked, I would say, try to find something that really interests you about if it's an assignment. Try to find something in that assignment that really interests you, or write about something that really interests you, and find what interests you within those interests.
Yeah, because you have to be invested,
Mhm.
right? And you have to give a shit.
Yeah.
And also, and when you do give a shit, you do your due diligence as a writer when it comes to the research. There are so many writers that I've seen that like get things wrong. Like there's a very famous writer that I kind of know that I got to kind of work alongside, and I know one of his projects, and he went and interviewed somebody, and like he got the person's name wrong, and this was like a crucial person to the story. And I later on did another project that was like in the same sphere,
Mhm.
and ever since I learned that about him, it like took something away from me
Mhm.
from like from a respect level. I'm like, how? I'm like, how did you like? Everyone makes honest mistakes, but I'm like, how did you get that wrong?
Yeah.
Like you just you didn't like go the distance of like validating this.
Right.
And it was like it's a little thing, but a big thing.
Mhm.
And but little things matter. Details matter, I think, when you're writing, right? Because when someone sees that in a book, then you lose all trust. Like if you get some of that stuff wrong, especially when it comes to facts and dates and information. What writers have influenced you most as a reader?
Well, my very favorite writer is a writer named Mary Gateskill. And talk about writing from the heart. She writes from the heart, the soul, the gut, and everywhere else. I mean, soon as I read her first book of short stories, I knew she was, you find your people. She was one of my people. I consider her a teacher because reading her work has taught me so much. Um, but as far as legendary writers and all, I really like Truman Capote. Um, I like, well, my favorite book is Lolita, so Nabokov, I would say, is a big influence on me.
I think like most of us, artists, even when you're a working artist, you're still doing like side hustles and things like that. I
Oh,
would love, like we've been friends for quite some time now, but
yes.
we're always working and like we rarely get time to like go like, hey, talk about other stuff. What have been some of like your regular jobs that you've done as you've pursued your career in the arts? Have you had regular jobs? I can't picture you doing anything but
Well,
this.
you'd be able to picture me at the one when I was just starting as a writer, what I did. I was a perfume boy at Macy's.
Like one of those,
Yes, one
you're
of the people
spraying
that everyone,
cards?
yes. I was actually with an agency. It was called Promotion Makers, and they would send you out on different promotions. Mostly it was perfume at Macy's or Bloomingdale's, but sometimes they'd send you out to a bar with a beautiful woman, and you'd go around like offering people to taste this new liquor or something.
Yeah, yeah,
And
yeah.
it paid very well. I wish I could still do it
Yeah.
because it paid so well.
Yeah, that's like marketing and sales. I did the same thing. I went around selling candy bars for a while for this marketing. And it's funny when I was in my 20s and there was all these other salesmen in their 30s, 40s, 50s. And I remember the first year I did that, they're like, you're the number one. I was doing it like I didn't even know what I was doing, but I was like the number one salesman working for the company Sobe, selling like these candy bars that they were trying to bring out. It never ended up kind of going, but that was like this just weird random side
I
job
was
I
a
did.
top seller too. You know why? I was so shy. Everyone was all the other perfume boys and gals were like very aggressive. Try this, Chanel, Chanel, Chanel. But I was so shy, I would stand in the corner and that without me
Everyone just
knowing
go up
it.
to you like, are you lost?
Yeah, no, they would come over and say, "Well, what are you selling?" Because they
Get
thought
away from
they
this guy.
probably felt it had to be something so exclusive
Yeah.
and so wonderful.
Yes, you weren't
that-
pushing too
yeah.
hard. You weren't pressing too hard. What about anything else? Any other side jobs that like regular jobs, if you wanna
No, I
call it?
was the world's clumsiest waiter. I'm clumsy and slow. I tried that, didn't make it very far. After a couple of nights, they cut me loose. No, that's really it.
Where did you grow up?
Queens, New York.
And what was your childhood like? Talk a little bit about that.
Well, I come from a big Italian American family. So I have a brother and lots of cousins that are like brothers and sisters to me. So it was a loving family. It was very, in that way, it was very secure and very comfortable. But also in an Italian American family from that era, it was like male and female roles were very stringently observed. Like a boy was expected to be very good at sports and very macho and I was sort of, let's say, poetic. I didn't really fit in. So,
Growing up, I was always like an artist athlete too, and you start to go like, "Hey, who else wants to read poetry and play football?" And it was like, "No one."
See, but I didn't have the football. At least I had the
You had the
football
poetry
going.
side,
I
yes.
just had the poetry and the drawing and everything. So in that way, I felt alone. But I was lucky that I did have a supportive family. But I did feel lonely and different.
My wife's Greek, and it's not so different than the Italian kind of upbringing. When you see like how boys are treated and how girls are treated, it's like very defined roles, whether you like it or
Whether you
not.
like it or
And
not.
so I have to imagine, you feel this pressure and stress to like not live up to what your parents have like put you in this box.
And they don't mean it in a bad way.
No, it's culture.
It's
a
what they
cultural
know.
thing.
Yeah. So, they're doing it lovingly, but if you don't fit in, you don't fit in and you can't, it's like square pegs. You just can't, no matter what. So it puts a lot of pressure on you internally.
Yeah. Did you use that as a writer ever? Like, did you use that kind of idea?
Well, I think that is now that's just inadvertently in me. That's just part of who I am. When I walk into a party where I don't know anybody, the hair on my neck still stands up.
When did you first realize that you wanted to pursue art as a career? Was it at a young age?
Yeah, I mean, because I remember, like, I always liked to draw, and I used to draw it was almost like a comic strip. Like I would draw stories out. Like, oh, now he's going into the woods, and then the next page would be, and now he meets this person. So in a way, I was, if not a writer, I was a storyteller. And so I always thought that I would be an artist. I really thought that I would be an artist in the kind of artist that paints or draws or something like that, an illustrator.
That's funny. I had the same upbringing in terms of I would draw frames, almost like comic books and stories, and make my own books and staple them together. And now it's funny. My mom still sends them to me. She goes, "Look, I found one." Of course, they were always like ultra violent. It was like giant knives stabbing people and all this stuff. What did your parents do for work?
My mom was a homemaker, and my dad was in the construction field.
So now that's interesting, right? When they have, pretty, I will not call them regular, but like, just
Conventional
jobs.
Yeah.
So how does that go when you go, "Hey, mom and dad, I want to be an artist"? Because I think what happens a lot of people I've known, not my personal experience, my parents were always very supportive in what I wanted to do. But you hear so many stories of like, artists potential artists who have, the police dad and the nurse mom, where they're like, it's so foreign to them that like this is not a profession, that this is a hobby, or this is like something that you cannot pursue. How did your parents embrace or not with the idea that like, hey, you wanted to pursue the arts? Were they supportive in that?
Well, they never discouraged me. It was when I was a teenager and I wanted to be an actor. Of course, they always talked about how difficult it is to get into that, they worried about me because I was the type of person. Even today, like I'll have two different color socks on. Like I'm a little dreamy, and they didn't see me in the world, getting. So my father's dream for me, and this is the God's honest truth, was to work in the post office.
Why?
Because it would be security. You work there for a number of years, and you have your pension for the rest of your life. And he wouldn't have to worry about me.
Stability.
Yeah, he wouldn't have to worry about me. I wouldn't have been a worry.
Yes. That's funny.
He meant it with all the love and everything.
Of course. Yeah, that you want stability. I mean, that is the thing too. Working as a writer, actor, anything in this field, it's constant instability. How have you dealt with that throughout your career, the ups and downs of being an artist?
Wow. I mean, you do go through some very lean times. But it just seems for me, I don't know, God, the universe, the powers that be, whatever you call it, like whenever I'm like at my lowest ebb, something sweeps in
Yes. Isn't that
and
amazing?
rescues me.
Isn't that amazing how that happens? Every time, I've been doing this now 25 plus years. Every time I'm on death's door, I get something that comes in and saves me, or there's this resurgence. There's a great scene, the movie Snatched, Guy Ritchie movie, where there's these boxing matches with Brad Pitt, and every time he's about to get knocked out, he just flies up and knocks the other guy out. And every time I watch that, I'm like, this is what my career feels like, where it's like, 1, 2, punch, you're like, the count goes almost to 10 and you just come back up and resurrect yourself. Do you think that that kind of duality actually makes you a better artist? Because I feel like I am at my best when I'm at my lowest. I mean, it sucks and it feels horrible, but it's when I get the most fierce and I come back stronger.
I think when I was younger, it definitely played into becoming better and hungrier and fine tuning everything so that it was better because you had to be better. When you're
Yeah.
selling yourself, you can't say every new project you're selling yourself again. So you've got to be better than the last one. But now I'm at a place where I proved myself and I just want the plateau.
Yeah, that makes sense. Also, it's funny, when you get in your, like, 30s and 40s and you have some downs, you're like, "Well, I have to figure this out because I don't have any other skill sets. Like, what am I gonna do? I've invested myself for, like, this is all I know how to do, I'm not gonna learn a new trade."
I used to say there's not that many jobs for a professional food taster or a bed tester.
Exactly. So we talked about, I know you wanted to pursue acting, then you kinda used writing as a pivot, and then you kinda got back into acting, right? So tell me a little bit about the acting side of you, pursuits early, and then after, like, kinda having success as a writer, uh, finding coming back to acting.
Well, I started doing, like workshops and off Broadway plays, and then I started writing plays and skits for my actor friends and myself. And we would, it was like in the 30s, hey, let's put on a show in the barn. It was that kind of thing. We would do it like in the West 40s in those little theaters there and everything. And I would write, specific roles for specific friends, and we would do it. But the thing about it back then is, I mean, I don't think some of the younger people today realize how lucky they were because you would do it, but like if you had an audience of 30, you were lucky. Today, you could put it on, you
Yeah.
could put it on Instagram or YouTube, and you can build up an audience of thousands, hundreds of thousands, or even millions. You could. It's not as limited where you had to go out with flyers and try to get people to come in. You're begging your friends to come, and if
Yeah.
anyone ever came to see it, and then once you do it, it's gone.
Yeah, everyone has an audience now.
Yeah.
In the last 5 to 10 years now, we've had a lot of huge changes in the industry. One being COVID. Did COVID affect your work as a writer and actor in any way?
Not at all.
Really?
Not at all, because I was working on a book, and I was, I live pretty reclusive now anyway, so it didn't really affect me like most people. And I haven't really been acting in the past few years, not because of lack of desire to, just because I'm busy working on writing, which is what I make a living at, and
Do
I
you
just
think the writing has kinda, replaced your passion for acting? Or
no,
no, acting's still kind of the top tier thing?
yeah,
How do you deal with that as an artist? Like, it's a difficult thing, right? Because, if I'm sitting here saying, "Oh, did I do what I wanted?" Like, I came pretty close, but I didn't do the exact thing I wanted. So how do you deal with that? It's a little difficult, right? It's like you have success, but it's like you shoot for 100% and you ended up at 90. You're like, "Ah, I was right there,
but
close."
there's two comforts. One is that I know that I did everything I could do. Like I
Yeah.
could I don't
Did
like
not
some
for
people
lack
say
of
I
trying.
should have done this. I should have gone to LA.
And they never do anything, right? They don't leave. They don't leave Virginia.
Right.
Like, "Hey, I could have been," who knows? You could have been a good actor, or a great actor, or not even a good actor, but like someone who got recognized or noticed. But
Yeah.
you're like, geography is a thing too. Like, you never take that risk or that chance.
Yeah, I did. I took every opportunity. I did say yes to everything. And that's the first thing that gives me some peace of mind. And the other thing is the two films that I did do, and you're a part of both of them. Let Me Die Quietly, not perfect, which I wrote, and then Fetish, because at least I could say, well, they exist and they'll keep on existing.
100%.
So
And there's so many people whose goal is to do a movie.
Mhm.
And they did, and also, not only did we do a movie, but we did a movie with Joan Collins.
Yeah, legend.
Which is like unbelievable. And
Yeah.
I'm sure that's got to have even more of like the cherry on the cake for you, because like she comes from that part of Hollywood that like has been that draw for you, right? It's like that's pulled you in, that just
Yes,
that
she's-
golden Hollywood. Like, she's part of that era.
When I wrote that short script, my producing partner, Kelvin Dale, we were thinking, I had originally wrote it as a short play, and he wanted to do it as a short film. So I was thinking of it, it's a two-character play about a TV journalist interviewing an older legendary female star. And I was looking at kind of like B and C and D list actresses. And Kelvin said to me, well, if you could cast anyone in the world in that role, who would be your dream casting? Who would be your top three people? So I said, well, it would be Elizabeth Taylor, who was alive at the time, but she was ill, Sophia Loren, or Joan Collins. So he said, well, what's stopping you from asking them? Which was that was like a great learning lesson for me too. It's like, if you don't ask, the answer is
Oh,
no.
yeah. I have learned I ask for everything, and this is like the producer in me, like, I've had people tell me, like, "How do you you just get everything." 99% is asking. Just ask. Have no shame. I don't have any shame when it comes to asking anything.
I didn't ask Elizabeth Taylor because I knew she was sick. I didn't go to Sophia Loren yet, but I sent a letter to Joan Collins' agent.
Now, let's talk about that for a second. So you and Kelvin, who obviously one of my favorite people in the world, just such a great person, great producer.
Mine too.
You collaborated on this idea for the script. The script is done. You start talking about, actually, let's make this movie.
Well, and I wanted to work with you because I was coming off the editing experience with you, and I knew that I wanted to work with you. So I already had you on board, I think.
Yeah, that was something. I mean, again, it's like, I just appreciate that so much because so many times people put people in a box, So like in the capacity that we work together, you were the writer, I was an editor. There's not a lot of people that give an editor an opportunity.
I could tell from your personality and your energy and everything. I knew that you'd be a great director.
Thanks. Well, I remember you saying too, with what we were trying to do with the first film, that you had always said you helped me like redirect this in the post. So like, if you can do it in the post, if you have the chance to actually do it in the production, it's even kind of easier. So I always appreciated that. I forget, how long was it after we did the other film together than the Joan Collins project?
I think it was like a year.
Okay. Yeah. So it was pretty close. So I'm glad it was good timing, right?
Yeah.
Again, like for me, you put the idea for the project, the script comes out, and Kelvin, great advice. Good producers do things like that, right? It might be an obvious thing, but sometimes the obvious is not what's in the mindset of like the writer or the director. We go like, right, who's your ideal person, and why not go after them?
Yeah.
So how do you approach Joan Collins back then? Because I wasn't a part of that process. By the time you called me, very enthusiastically going, guess what? I've got some good news. How did you go after Joan, and what was that like? You reached out to her agent? How did you get there? It was just online?
Trying to remember how I got her agent. Probably a lot of sleuthing online. Because I didn't know anyone. I know people in the business, but I didn't know anyone who knew who was representing her at the time. So I did find out who was representing her, and I sent a letter and a script. No, first I sent a letter. Then he asked me for the script. Then he showed it to Joan, and he asked me for the Fame Game, the book that I wrote.
Oh.
So I guess she wanted to see like if I was the real thing, or like you said, you have to have you have to prove yourself. Yes. So she liked the Fame Game, and so she asked to meet me. So I was living in New York at the time, so I flew out to LA to meet Joan Collins.
That's amazing. That must have been an amazing experience,
God.
right? And
I'm Mr. Vintage Hollywood, so to go and meet like someone like that, who's the queen of Vintage Hollywood.
So what was that feeling like? Were you nervous flying out there? You must have been, right? It's only natural to be nervous.
I was. We were meeting for lunch, and it was her agent and her, and I got to the restaurant early, of course, and when she came in, something takes over. It's like, even like with some of the interviews I do when I'm a little nervous about it, like when you're nervous, and then when the moment comes, it's not a calm, but it's a professionalism.
It's an adrenaline.
Yeah.
I think it's adrenaline.
Yeah.
I get a high off of it. Like I'm like a weird mix where like I have all the confidence in the world and then none at the same time. But that leading up of like I've done shoots where, I'm in charge of like 100 people. I remember I was in charge of an entire football stadium of actors once for like this commercial series. And on the day, they're like, I just remember someone slaps a megaphone in my chest, goes, "Here you go. They're all yours." And you go, holy shit. But those first few words of the megaphone are like nervous, and then once you get it, you're like, "Okay, I'm good."
Yeah.
It's like, right, you have that moment of, like, nerves, and then you get past it, and then it's like this high,
Something takes
right?
over. Yeah, it's very weird, but my personal gods surround me and take over, and that's what happened. And I knew that she was the kind of person who, if you didn't make that impression in the first 3 minutes, she was done with you.
Yeah.
She doesn't suffer fools.
Yeah, because the thing is also she's been doing this for so long, right?
Yes.
When you do this so long, you just can spot certain
You get an
things.
instinct,
Yeah.
absolutely.
So what was first few moments in with her, what was that like? What'd you guys talk about?
I remember when we sat down, it was like pleasantries and everything, but then she asked me who my favorite directors were.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah. And, it was kind of put me on the spot because I do have a lot, and I didn't know who to say because I wanted to gear the answer towards her. I was
Yeah.
good.
Of course, you gotta politic a little bit there.
We talked about the script,
Mhm.
of course, and I told her about you, and I said, "Oh, he's this young director. He's so great. He's so good at energy." And then I told her about she had never done a short film before.
Oh,
So I was telling her about the short film festival circuit.
yeah.
How
That's interesting. I didn't know that we were like her, we
yeah. So I was
first,
telling her
voyage.
all the markets for it,
Yeah.
like, the Tribeca and Sundance and all the markets that it can go to and all the venues for it. So we talked about that. I remember I had a card with the poster for the film that we had done previously, Let Me Die Quietly, and it was me and the leading lady, and I gave her the card, and she said, "Who's the girl?"
That's hilarious.
Very
Well,
Joan Collins.
yes, very Joan. I remember you calling me and telling me about the meeting, and then I had to meet with her
Yes.
because she thought I was too young. Like,
Mhm.
she didn't think that I would be able to do a good job.
Right.
Right? Is that?
Yeah, she came to New York with her husband.
Yes. And I remember I think we met at their apartment, and then we also went out to
Yes,
like a
we went for drinks.
dinner or drinks
Yeah.
at maybe like at the lobby of a hotel. I also remember just thinking like, oh shit, yeah, this, like she was looking for reasons to like find me not capable of doing this.
Right.
Because I was very young. I mean, looking back, I'm like, God damn, I was pretty young.
You
to
were
do
very
that
young.
movie. Yeah.
I remember an exchange when she was leaving. She said she had agreed to do it, and she said, "Well, I just want to look good." And you said, "Well, that won't be hard."
I said that?
Yeah.
Oh, right. That's right. Good. Yeah. I do know how to flirt. So that's always come in handy.
It was the
And
right
you know
thing.
what? And she was such an amazing person to work with. I mean, obviously it all ended up working out. Whatever we said in that meeting, you had impressed her, I had impressed her,
Mhm.
which is also like, gotta give herself a little bit of credit. Like, she's worked with so many people. She did not need us at
Yeah.
all. She didn't
Yeah.
have to do that. And then when it came down to actually making the movie, like, she was fantastic. Like, still to this day, of all the things I've done, that is one of the most positive experiences in so many ways. And working with her was fantastic.
Yeah.
I'm not going to sit here and pretend like I know every movie she's ever been in, but I do feel like she's been undervalued as an actress. Like, my experience with her working on that movie, she's incredibly talented.
Oh,
Like, there
yeah.
were moments where there was one moment at the end of the film where, spoiler alert, where she's kind of like fading off and
Mhm.
drugged and things like that. And I remember, we had a camera that was handheld to try to enhance like kind of the surrealness of it and to float a little bit. And it was a close up on her, and it was kind of like getting a little bit closer to her, and she was getting a little closer to the camera. And I remember her delivering her lines and being like pulled into the monitor. And I remember standing next to the script supervisor for this one take, and we were just like, it was like watching the final product live. And
Mm.
she was so good and so convincing and just so invested. And I remember both of us getting closer, closer, closer to the monitor, closer to the monitor. And then it was like cut. And we're like, oh my God, that was so good. She was just such a really great actress, a trooper. I mean, also, we shot late into the night.
Yes.
There was a blizzard that came.
Yes. And we had an outdoor scene.
I know. And she like never complained about
No.
anything.
She sat with the crew and gossiped and told tales about her career.
She hung out with everybody. I know. She ate microwaved food,
Yeah.
like all of us, some during the breaks. But just what a great person. And then I don't know, did she send you Christmas cards?
Oh, yeah,
'Cause,
yeah.
do you still get them?
Yeah.
Oh, you bastard! I kind of got cut off a couple years ago, but she would always send Christmas cards
Mhm.
after, and I always thought like such a nice thing to like stay in touch in that way.
Yeah.
And just what a great person.
Let's do another movie with her.
I would love to. Well, what was we were supposed to, we were like on a roll there for a little bit. it's just such an interesting thing that happens. People make movies and you think like, oh, this will lead to something. You just
Right.
never know what's going to lead to what or what's going to lead to nothing. But remember, right after that, we had
Dogs and Pocketbooks.
God, I was thinking about that recently. We got to get back to that movie. And even, I think that's even more relevant now.
We could really make it work, and we'll just add a little bit about the Blake Lively trial, like a little bit of
the influencer world we live in now. It's so superficial and so perfect. We were supposed to do that movie and Lindsay Lohan was attached to that, right? Or can we talk about that?
Well, we better not because
she was attached for a minute, and then I don't remember. I won't include the what.
There was a lawsuit or something because I don't know. I don't want to revisit it.
It just got. We were like, oh fuck.
Remember, they were calling you. Crazy people were calling you at the studio because it got so much publicity. It was worldwide. It was like
there was there was something. Yeah, this studio gets a lot of fucking insane calls.
My dream was to be an actor. So I made a film opposite an icon, a legend, a Hollywood legend, in a script that I wrote. She was my leading lady. I mean, so even if I don't have 30 films when I die, I have that.
Yeah. And it's such a good movie. I watched it again recently for this, and I'm like, oh, this was so good.
It's an entertaining
It
film.
looks good. It sounds good. It was such a fun experience to make.
That was a charmed shoot. Like so many great people came together to make that film. And, even like the makeup art, like Anne Marie, like makeup artist, like she's still in my life, like so many great people. Everything was perfect.
Yeah, it was.
And we didn't have any time. We were so rushed.
I know we shot that movie quickly, a couple of days.
Like I think 4 days, maybe.
When you write something, certain directors might change a ton of the stuff in the script. Certain people stay true to the script. As a writer, what is your thought on that process? Like, do you get kind of precious about it? Do you want your kind of script to stay pretty close to how it was envisioned? Or how do you deal with that as a writer, kind of trusting a director to maybe make changes or make deviations? And how much before you start to get uncomfortable?
I try to be very comfortable with it because I know it's when I see a lot of movies that were written by the director, I could see with my own two eyes that it would have been improved if it had a different director, if the script had a different director.
Yeah, basically everything M. Night Shyamalan's ever made.
Or if he had a different script.
Or a good editor. Like there's a lot, what I see too, to the flip side is I see a lot of directors that are very good, more successful than me. But you also see a little bit of a curse to that where like I watch sometimes films where I'm like, whoever cut this was afraid to be honest with the director. Like, so you need an editor who's brutally honest. Like I'm a brutally honest editor, but I also know to respect the line. But I'm always going to suggest something. But I watch movies sometimes and I'm like, if this had a different editor that would have maybe told like the director, hey, this movie's going on for like 80 minutes too long. Like you have to have that kind of relationship and not be so precious. But as a writer, you're saying you're okay with people changing?
I'm not going to say I'm okay because first of all, it would really depend on the director. I mean, if it's a shared vision and he's adding things that are opening it up and bringing out things that I never saw in it, the good of the whole project would be my final thing. I mean, I just want an excellent project more than anything else. But there would be certain things if they're really changing or if they're making it worse. I mean, how do you tell? You
don't know. You sometimes honestly, like you don't know. That's the thing. People don't understand about making a movie. There's moments like where you have good things on set, but then to know if a movie's going to be like terrific or like you can't really tell sometimes on a set. I mean, it's more easy. Like I've been on some other movies that I've made that I'm like, no, this is going to be terrible. You're just no. But it's hard to, I'm sure as a writer, it's hard to kind of know, like, is this change good or bad? Well, I do remember for Fetish, we remember once we kind of saw where we were shooting, we were like, oh, wait a minute. We're like, we have a dining room. We have this foyer. We have a piano. I do remember we took one scene that was meant to kind of take place in one environment and started just chunking out the dialogue, going, all right, we're going to keep this dialogue the same, but we're going to put it now in the dining room and sit down there just to kind of keep.
And you even
moving.
had me sing some of the dialogue.
Oh, that's my favorite thing from the movie. And like, again, you know what? It's weird, but weird is good.
Yeah.
And I will say,
well, it's a weird movie.
People who saw the movie always talk to me about like that scene. They're like we should put context to it. So we had one part where there was just essentially supposed to be dialogue back and forth with you and Joan. We had this piano. And I remember I think I had said, why don't you just go to the piano and like sing the
I sang it a
dialogue?"
cappella.
Yeah, and you did great. And I think I remember at some point you were kind of like had maybe a little bit of reservation. You're like, I'm not a singer. I'm like, that makes it even better. But the fact that like you're not aware, like your character is just like just lives in this weird like thing, and has all these strange rooms. Like that location we found was great. It had
Oh,
a
it was perfect.
fireplace, had all this like weird decor, and then we're like, once we saw that piano, we're like, you got to go to the piano and like sing something. And we found one of the lines of dialogue that we thought would be like, humorous in terms of making it like this just like little vocal moment. But I thought that was so much fun. And also like that goes back to the whole thing we're talking about, just like the trust thing, like you're a writer, you're an actor, and you have you come up, if someone else has this idea, you're like, do you trust this person? And I think it was like a good risk that paid off.
Oh, I
because that
think
was so fun.
in that case, definitely yes. It was great.
I think you got to embrace the weird. The more I've done this and the more I've worked in like, other uh, mediums and genres, like you work on TV shows and like sometimes TV shows are so afraid to take risks because there's so many like corporate hierarchy chains that like they're trying to make all these buckets and not offend people. When you make a movie like this, it's like, I think the weirder the better. I
Oh
mean,
yeah.
we remember that even the set we made was like sitting on a giant person's face. It was like with
Yes.
the eyes. And then I remember I'm like, hey, let's bring in a fucking sign language interpreter and just have her signing like just weird stuff. But it wasn't like random, like it wasn't like a circus where there's just all this. It was things that just made it a little bit uncomfortable, which was like the whole point, I think, of certain
Yeah.
parts of the movie.
Yeah.
Like how do you enhance?
Well, that was all you.
that?
That was all your addition. So there was even the mannequins, and you said, I want a shot of Joan next to that mannequin.
Oh yeah, these mannequins with giant breasts.
Yeah.
I mean, I all these again things like the like happy accidents type stuff. I remember we were thinking of putting all these mannequins in the set of the main character, like he has all these trophies. And at first I was looking around for traditional mannequins, and then I found this place in New Jersey who had these like voluptuous, which were even better because like thematically, again, when you think about like beauty and kind of like the idea of like trophy women, like kind of which plays into the whole kind of Hollywood side of the script. It fit perfect. But it wasn't like we went out looking for that. It was like we were looking for mannequins, and then you see those, you're like, that's perfect. Right? That's part of like kind of the movie magic that happens when like the universe just kind of goes, here's this. And you go, oh God, we got to do this. I remember that company was like, no, we don't sell mannequins. And I'm like, come on. I like begged them, and then eventually they just gave in and I had to go drive. I remember I had my whole car full of these like half torso and full body. I don't even know. I've never seen them ever again. I saw them for our film, and I've never seen mannequins like that.
When I
ever
walked
a
in, I
store.
was like, I was astonished. The whole set was just astonishing.
And, I still have some of those downstairs. We have them in our makeup room, these like voluptuous mannequins, which is fun. And honestly, like again, Joan just rolled with all of it. You know what I mean? It's almost like just having her there, this Hollywood icon in front of these like bizarre things. She was such a good sport. Is it difficult to act in something that you wrote? Was that difficult?
Well, it was the only choice I had since people weren't clamoring for me. No, I don't think it is. I would just prefer not to because you lose perspective. I mean, not that you lose perspective. I mean, you only have one way of playing it because it's the way you heard it in your mind when you were writing it. So you don't. I have a tendency not to explore with it as I would if it was something that I didn't write. I would really like. I would memorize it and then I would try it different ways. But with my own stuff, I have a tendency not to do that as much as I should. But like I said, no, I haven't really been. I wish people would offer me stuff.
Do you remember the balcony shoot where
Yes.
I mean, again, like I always feel kind of bad thinking back to this, where it's like a run and gun indie movie. I'm really young, not care. I mean, I'm also kind of a reckless person, not like to a bad point, but to where I'm just like, whatever. This is who cares. And I just remember we had like cables, it's snowing, the wind is whipping. We're like up high on like the 20th, floor. And I just remember Joan going, is it safe? And I'm like, yeah, totally safe, completely safe. And I'm in the back of my head, I'm like, this is not safe at all. Thank God she left with no scars.
Oh, we had an electrician who knew what he was doing, I hope.
I think so. But no, it's just such a good, and we shot that scene like so late at night and she just didn't care. Like she was just so cool. Like she was so strong and just such a great, great person. It was such a,
she was there to make
project.
the movie, She was there to act and she did. She was no diva.
I remember, one compliment we kinda got, about working with her was that, it's funny you talked earlier, like, she made the joke of, like, "Just make me look good."
Mhm.
But as we kinda got into the film to explore, like, what it was really about, like, vanity and, what all that comes with that, we started to show that character almost in a very, like, dressed down light,
Yeah, stripped away from all the glamour.
stripped away from it all, and she did that for us as a character, and you think about this, she's this Hollywood icon, she's known for her beauty, and there are parts of the movie where, like, we just make her look like everyday and regular, which is
Mhm.
kinda abnormal for her, and I
Yeah.
remember, during screenings and after the movie was done, in some festivals, some of her family members, I remember saying to me, like, you really got her to kinda do that and, like, and be vulnerable, which was not something that she's done before. So
Mhm.
I think that's kinda like a kudos to us that, like, we really she must have trusted us, which is great, just to kinda be vulnerable like that because it's not something I think that how she was used a lot in the past in films. She
Right.
was always this, like, iconic beauty, and there are obviously scenes in our movie where she looks fantastic,
Yeah.
but we wanted to show, like, the kinda normal side of even that character and that person
Yeah,
in the
behind the
film.
Hollywood sign, it's what it is. Because when it opens, she's in all her splendor, and then slowly she gets
Yes.
stripped of all the artifice.
Yeah, the
Mhm.
glamour. I mean, she looks like $1,000,000 on that TV scene
Yes.
on that TV set, and, yeah, we just kinda wanted to show that character, uh, as a regular person, and I
Mhm.
I I would have to imagine maybe that's something she related to, to a degree, that,
Mhm.
like, outside of the on-camera presence, there is this human being in person behind all that glitz and glamour, and it's a great person, and so I appreciate that very much that she kinda was willing to take that risk with us and kinda be vulnerable on camera like that for us,
Mhm.
and I think, it makes our movie unique, and I think
Yeah.
I think that movie will be a cult classic. It's been out there a little bit, and I just think it's still more people will still
I
find it.
hope so.
How would you define success now versus, like, when you were younger? What you thought success would be, and how do you define success now?
Um, it's a little vulgar, but I'm gonna say it, money. When I was younger, alls I cared about was being great or being as good as I could. I mean, I really, really cared about, um, every line that I wrote, or, like, I would go to bat for, like, if I didn't like the headline of an article that for a newspaper and I didn't like the headline, I would really fight to get the headline that I wanted, every detail about things like that. Um, Now I really want security, like any artist, I mean, you I feel that I put in a lifetime of work, on all these projects that I've done, and now I would really like to stop really what I'm really trying to say is to stop having to sell myself. If, like, for every new project an artist most artists who don't reach out, they have to sell themselves, they have to sell the project, they have to, like, do the song and dance to make the project sound appealing. It's not like, "Oh, it's Charles Casillo, we can just go ahead with it." You have to do the song and dance. I'd like to reach the point where I don't have to do the song and dance, and I get paid for it because it is me.
That makes sense. It's funny, I kinda when I was younger, I think my vision of success was money, and
Hmm.
it was more I never wanted this to be a hobby. I wanted this to be a profession. Like, I remember when I was really young making films, everybody was like, "I just want this to go into a film festival so my family can go see it." And I was always like, "I don't care about that." I'm like, "I want my movie in Best Buy so somebody can buy it." Like, that was just my measure of success. And I was able to hit that click. It's funny now, Best Buy doesn't sell movies
Yeah.
anymore. But at one point, I had projects of mine reach that level of like, now you're in a retail store.
Mhm.
Um, but now as I've gotten older, I care more about the creative. I mean, like, you got to make money because we all have to live. But at this point, I'd rather make less and care about what I'm working on, and instead of, like, I've had moments in my life where I've made good money on projects I hated. I want that balance now. I want fair money, but good project. But I understand exactly what
Yeah,
you're
I don't
saying.
mean I wanna work on crop or things that I hate, but I do wanna, I wanna reap the benefits of everything that came before.
Yeah, there comes a point where you're tired of selling yourself, and
Mhm.
it's not like you have to be a household name, but it's just like, what else do I need to do? Like, I
Right.
mean, how many books have you written
A
now?
lot.
Like, so You shouldn't, yeah, there should be a reward that comes with that of just reputation and expectation as, who you are as an author. Alright, before we go, give me one tip you would give someone who wants to pursue writing as a career. What should they be doing every day?
I would tell anyone who wants to be a writer just to follow their bliss and find their own way because there really is no path. I've talked about how my path went. It was not like traditional taking classes and having a schedule to write on. So I really think that everyone has to do what works for them, and you find that. And it's only through trial and error that you'll find what works for you. So do that, but do what makes you happy. The other thing I would say is learn to live with ChatGPT and AI because I don't know where that's going. That's a subject for a whole nother day, but it's frightening to people who have spent their whole life writing and spending their whole life trying to become a better writer, and now there's something that could write in 1 minute.
Do you think it's a good thing for the industry or a bad thing?
Whatever I say right now in 3 years is gonna be obsolete, whatever direction it goes. But from where I'm sitting, what it looks like, I think it's a bad thing for artists.
Well, it's like we talked about earlier. Part of, I think, the good of the art form is the process. If the process gets taken away, the idea of thought of figuring out how things are going to play out, if it becomes done for you, I think you lose some of that. What we talked about, like look, ChatGPT can write maybe more from the brain side, but it can't from the soul side because it's not a living, creature. The good thing about art is like that it's often flawed. It's often got, it reflects a human being.
I wonder as it goes on and improves, how intricate it will become to mirror that. It can never really feel, but how detailed it will become to mirror real human feelings. Um, if it reads enough Dostoevsky, and
Yeah.
Woody Allen, and could it start to mirror that in a way that's very touching?
As an audience member, do you have any interest reading something that ChatGPT wrote?
Not now.
I don't
Not
either.
the way it is now,
I
no.
don't either because there's no, I want to be able to relate to something. I want to
Right.
be able to relate to the fact that even if it's convincing, I want to know that it came from a living mind.
Me too. I have zero interest in reading anything ChatGPT, and I could spot it in a minute.
Yeah.
We talked about that, how you could spot it.
Yeah. It's immediately, almost immediately identifiable. Well, thank you so much. This was a great conversation.
Yeah,
It's
I
great
love
to
it.
see you. You're
It's
like
always
one of
great
my
to see
best
you.
friends
Yeah.
in the industry. It's like I'll always love seeing you. We got to find more reasons to work together.
Yeah, let's do that.
We're due for another movie.
Mhm.
Joan Collins, if you're watching this, it's never too late to do another picture. All right, thanks, Charles.
My pleasure.